German Chancellor Olaf Scholz has met with U.S. President Joe Biden in Washington to pressure the U.S. Congress to approve more military aid for Ukraine. Lawmakers are working on a bill that would send tens of billions in assistance to Kyiv, but a political deadlock has left the legislation in limbo.
In Washington, where political paralysis has left vital aid to Ukraine in jeopardy, Germany's Chancellor Olaf Scholz made a stop at the White House, joining in on efforts to push for the funds.
And,
without the support of the United States, Ukraine will have not a chance to defend its own country.
The U.S. is the largest supplier of military assistance to Ukraine. The White House has been warning for months that if lawmakers fail to resolve the deadlock on sending aid, it would hurt Kyiv's ability to fight off Russia's nearly two-year-old invasion.
The failure of the United States Congress, if it occurs, not to support Ukraine is close to criminal neglect. It is outrageous.
The U.S. Senate is making progress on a bill that includes some $60 billion in aid to Ukraine and funds for other U.S. allies. Senators hope to pass it within days. But it's unclear if the legislation will be approved by the U.S. House, where some Republicans are strongly opposed. The effects of the stalled funds are already being felt on Ukraine's front lines. U.S. and European officials say the delay is contributing to critical shortages of weapons and ammunition needed on the battlefield.
Jackson Janes is a political scientist and resident senior fellow at the German Marshall Fund and joins me now. Welcome to DW. Now, Chancellor Olaf Scholz and President Biden urged U.S. lawmakers to approve more aid for Ukraine. But at this point, do they have any sway over Congress?
At this point, it's unclear. I think probably the best thing that Mr. Scholz could have done was to say, Europe is here, Europe is ready, and Germany is in the lead to help Ukraine. But they're asking to actually be something that's more in leadership with the United States on making sure that Ukraine is sustainable. It's not quite clear whether that's going to work, though.
Mm-hmm. What will it take for that to work?
Well, it's basically a domestic fight in the United States and mostly in the House of Representatives. And it's keeping the question open as to whether they will support what the Senate, I guess, is trying to present to them. So it's a bit of a problem for Scholz to impact that, but he can only add support to Mr. Biden's attempt to say to the Senate and the House and the Congress in general, we have partners that are ready to move at eye level with us, and we have to maintain our own support so that Ukraine is not only surviving, but it's able to maintain itself over the next several years, not just this year.
What is the deadlock in the U.S. doing to the united front the West wants to present in the face of Vladimir Putin?
It's undermining it. And that's the problem I think that Mr. Biden was talking about when he said it's almost criminal for the U.S. to pull out of the support from Ukraine at this juncture. So that's the problem. It's basically domestic politics at work, trying to figure out, remember, this is an election year, and it's definitely difficult to extract that from that particular environment in which Mr. Biden is in. And I think it's important that Mr. Scholz was there just to say, we stand with you. Will you stand with us, is the question.
Now, that joint strength being undermined, what does that mean in practical terms for the people in Ukraine?
Well, I think that basically their support for Europe is increasing. I think that will maintain a level of support for Ukraine to keep going in this war with Russia. But the United States is in a major support of military hardware. And if that begins to decline, then it's going to make it that much more difficult for Europe to keep up that side of the support. They're supporting them in all kinds of ways financially. But the major problem is that if America doesn't give the support for military hardware, it's going to be very difficult for Ukraine to maintain its position toward the Russian aggression.
Now, the war on Ukraine is coming up on 2 years. There's no end in sight to the war in Gaza. How has all of this affected transatlantic relations and especially the relationship between the U.S. and Germany?
Well, it's basically underscored the fact that if we're going to solve any of those problems, we have to work with Europe and Germany in particular, since it's in the lead in terms of supporting Ukraine in the European context. So I think it just underscores the fact that we can't solve many of these problems without as we say in the trade, leadership and partnership and leadership. And that's important right now to keep the momentum going.
That was Jackson Janes of the German Marshall Fund. Thank you so much for your time.
Pleasure.